Welcome to the channel Hidden Coin Value. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding $80 million in plain sight. Well, before you go dumping your spare change on the table, let me tell you about one coin that already made headlines in the numismatic world, a coin that most Americans have handled without ever knowing what they were holding. We are talking about the 1994 D quarter dollar. Yes, a quarter. 25 cents. The kind of coin you'd use to feed a parking meter, or toss into a tip jar without a second thought. But this particular quarter, struck at the Denver Mint in 1994, has sold at auction, in top condition, for a jaw-dropping $37,000. Let that sink in for a moment. A coin worth 25 cents at face value, selling for $37,000 to a collector who wanted it badly enough to fight for it at auction. Now stick with me here, because today is not just about one incredible coin. We've got 4 more quarters coming up after this one, and I promise you, each one gets more unbelievable than the last. I'm not going to tell you the values yet, you're going to want to see this unfold for yourself, but I will say this. By the time we reach the final coin in today's video, you are going to look at your coin jar completely differently. So make sure you stick around till the very end, because coin number 5 today is going to leave you speechless. But right now, let's dive into the story of this 1994 D quarter, how it was made, why it became so valuable, and what you need to look for if you think you might have one sitting in your own pocket change. Let's rewind the clock back to 1994. The Denver Mint was running at full production that year, striking hundreds of millions of Washington quarters for everyday circulation. This was long before the 50-state quarters program launched in 1999, so in 1994, every quarter coming out of Denver still carried the classic Washington design that had been used since 1932, with George Washington's profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. Nobody at the time thought twice about these coins. They were just quarters. Millions of them, pouring out of the presses, destined for cash registers, vending machines, and piggy banks across the country. But somewhere in that massive production run, something went wrong. And when something goes wrong at the Mint, sometimes, just sometimes, it creates something incredibly right for collectors. You see, in the coin collecting world, perfection isn't always what drives value. In fact, it's often the mistakes, the anomalies, the errors, the moments where the machinery didn't do exactly what it was supposed to do that turn an ordinary coin into an extraordinary treasure. For this 1994 D quarter, collectors believe the coin in question exhibits a combination of a dramatic double die obverse, commonly known in the hobby as a DDO, along with evidence of a repunched mint mark, or RPM, on the reverse. Now, let me explain what these actually mean, because if you're new to coin collecting, these terms might sound like technical jargon. But trust me, once you understand them, you'll never look at your coins the same way again. A double die obverse happens during the coin's design creation process, not during the actual striking of the coin itself. Here's how it works. To create the dies that stamp out coins, the Mint uses a hub, basically a master tool that presses the design into a blank die, multiple times, to make sure the design is fully and deeply impressed. If that hub shifts even slightly between impressions, even by a fraction of a millimeter, you get doubling. The letters, the numbers, sometimes even Washington's profile itself, appear to have a ghost or shadow image layered right on top of the primary design. On this 1994 D quarter, collectors report visible doubling in the lettering of Liberty and in the motto, "In God We Trust," small, but unmistakable once you know where to look, especially under magnification. Now combine that with a repunched mint mark. Back in 1994, mint marks, that little d for Denver or p for Philadelphia, were still being hand-punched into individual working dies at the mint facility, one at a time, by human mint workers using a punch and a hammer. If that mint mark punch didn't seat perfectly on the first strike, the worker would strike it again, sometimes at a slightly different angle or position. The result? A mint mark that shows a secondary, overlapping impression. Collectors call this an RPM. When you get a DDO and an RPM on the same coin, that's when things get really interesting for collectors, because now you have two separate, documented mint errors compounding the coin's rarity. But here's the thing that really sends collectors into a frenzy: the condition this particular coin was found in. You see, most 1994 D quarters that circulated went through years of wear. They passed through thousands of hands, jingled around in pockets, got dropped on sidewalks, spun through washing machines, and generally got beat up the way pocket change does. By the time most of these coins are found today, they're heavily worn, barely recognizable in some cases. But every so often, a coin like this one gets pulled from circulation early. Maybe it went straight from a bankroll into someone's collection, or got set aside in a drawer for decades without ever really being spent. When that happens, and the coin survives in exceptional, practically mint condition, it becomes what's called a condition rarity. This particular 1994 D quarter, when it went to auction, was graded MS67 by PCGS, that's the Professional Coin Grading Service, one of the two most trusted third-party grading companies in the entire hobby, the other being NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. Now let me explain the grading scale real quick, because this matters a lot when it comes to value. Coins are graded on what's called the Sheldon scale, running from 1 all the way up to 70. A coin graded MS60 is considered mint state but with a lot of contact marks and imperfections. As you climb the scale, MS63, MS65, MS67, the coin gets closer and closer to perfect, with fewer marks, sharper strikes, and better luster. MS70 is considered theoretically flawless, a coin with zero imperfections visible even under magnification. An MS67 grade on a business strike quarter from 1994 is extraordinary. Most circulated 1994 D quarters you'd find today, if you dug through a jar of change, would grade somewhere between about good and maybe extremely fine at best, worth face value, or maybe a tiny premium if you're lucky. But an MS67? That's top pop territory, meaning it sits at or near the very top of the population reports that PCGS and NGC maintain for this specific date in mint mark. Population reports are exactly what they sound like: a running census of how many coins have been submitted and graded at each level. For 1994 D quarters, the vast majority graded fall in the MS63 to MS65 range. Once you climb to MS66 and above, the numbers drop off dramatically. And when you're talking about an MS67 example that also carries a documented doubled die and repunched mint mark, now you're talking about a coin that might be the only one of its kind ever certified at that exact grade with those exact error characteristics. That's what collectors call a condition census coin, one of the finest known examples in existence for that specific variety. Sometimes it's literally the single finest known specimen, the finest known, and when a coin holds the title, the price it commands at auction can go absolutely through the roof, because there is literally no way for a competing collector to find a better example. There simply isn't one. This is also where PCGS's TrueView photography and CAC verification come into play. TrueView imaging captures ultra-high-resolution photographs of a coin's surface, showing every detail of the luster, the strike, and yes, the doubling and repunching that make this coin special. Meanwhile, CAC, the Certified Acceptance Corporation, adds an additional layer of verification. When a coin receives a CAC sticker, it means an independent panel of experts has reviewed the PCGS or NGC grade and confirmed the coin is solidly, sometimes exceptionally, within that grade range, what collectors call PQ, or premium quality. A CAC sticker on an already rare MS67 error coin can push the value up even further, because serious collectors know that CAC-approved coins tend to hold and increase their value over time. Now, let's talk about why people are willing to pay this kind of money for a quarter. It comes down to a few key factors that drive the entire rare coin market. First, rarity. When a coin is one of a handful known to exist in a specific condition with specific errors, basic economics takes over. Limited supply, and if there's strong demand from registry set collectors trying to complete PCGS set registry or NGC registry collections, prices can spiral upward fast. Second, the story. Every great rare coin has a story behind it, and collectors love a good story. A coin that survived decades in obscurity, sitting in someone's coin jar or a forgotten bankroll, only to be discovered and recognized for what it truly is? That narrative adds emotional and historical weight that transcends the coin's metal content. Third, competition. Registry set collecting has become one of the biggest drivers of high-end coin prices in the last 2 decades. Collectors compete against each other for the highest ranking sets, and when 2 or 3 wealthy collectors are both chasing the same top pop coin to complete their registry set, bidding wars erupt. That's exactly the kind of environment that pushed this 1994 D quarter to its $37,000 hammer price. Let me paint a picture for you of how a coin like this might get discovered. Imagine a coin dealer sorting through a roll of quarters pulled from an estate sale, old rolls that had been sitting untouched in a safety deposit box for nearly 3 decades. Most rolls like this are mundane, face value coins, mixed with common dates, nothing special. But then, one coin catches the dealer's eye. The luster is different. Under the loupe, there's something odd about the lettering and Liberty, a slight shadow, a ghosting effect that shouldn't be there. The dealer's pulse quickens. He sets the coin aside, grabs a stronger magnifying glass, and there it is, unmistakable doubling on the obverse lettering. And when he flips it over to check the mint mark? Sure enough, the D looks off. Slightly doubled itself, like it was punched twice. This is the moment every coin hunter dreams about. That instant of recognition, when years of study and pattern recognition suddenly pay off, and you realize you might be holding something that could change your financial situation. The coin gets sent off to PCGS for grading and authentication. Weeks go by. And then the envelope arrives back, and inside, the coin is sealed in its protective holder, with the label reading 1994 D Washington Quarter, DDO/RPM, MS67. At that point, the dealer, or the lucky finder, knows exactly what they have. And when it goes to auction, with the right marketing, the right audience of registry set collectors watching, the bidding takes off. This is not a hypothetical, by the way. Coins exactly like this are found in circulation, in old bankrolls, in inherited coin collections, and yes, even in random pocket change, more often than you'd think. The overwhelming majority of people who find these coins have no idea what they're looking at. They see a quarter. They spend it. They lose out on what could have been a life-changing discovery. That's exactly why we're doing this video today, so that you know what to look for. Here's what you should do, right now, if you want to check your own quarters for potential value. First, grab any 1994 D quarters you might have. Check your coin jars, check rolls from the bank, check your parents' or grandparents' old coin collections if you have access to them. Second, get yourself a jeweler's loupe or a strong magnifying glass. At least 10x magnification is ideal. Third, examine the lettering closely, Liberty on the obverse, and I in God we trust, looking for any doubling, shadowing, or ghosting effect on the letters. Fourth, check the mint mark on the reverse, located above the R in quarter. Look for any signs of doubling or a secondary punch mark underneath the primary D. And fifth, if you see anything that looks unusual, do not clean the coin. This is critical. Cleaning a coin, even gently, can destroy its value by damaging the original surface and luster that graders and collectors look for. Set it aside carefully, and consider sending it to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and grading. Now, I want you to imagine, for just a moment, what it would feel like to check your own quarters and find something like this. To realize that the 25 cents sitting in your junk drawer might actually be worth $37,000. It happens. It's happened to regular, everyday people, not just professional collectors or wealthy investors. Grandmothers cleaning out attics. Kids inheriting old coin jars. People doing simple bank roll hunting as a hobby on weekends. And that's the magic of this hobby, the idea that a life-changing discovery could be sitting in any pile of loose change, waiting for someone with a sharp eye and a little bit of knowledge to recognize it. Now, I promised you this 1994 D quarter was just the beginning. Because coming up next, we've got 4 more quarters in this series, each one rarer, each one more valuable, each one with its own incredible story of mint errors, condition rarities, and jaw-dropping auction results. I'm not going to tell you the numbers yet. You're going to have to stick around to find out. But I will tell you this, the next coin in our lineup has a story involving a die crack so dramatic that even seasoned collectors did a double take when they first saw it under the light. And trust me, by the time we get to our 5th and final coin today, you are going to be absolutely stunned by what a simple $0.25 sold for. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching, because the next coin we're about to reveal might just change the way you look at pocket change forever. Stick with us, hidden coin value is just getting started. Next, the 1990p $0.25. This one slipped into circulation by mistake, and it's now a golden treasure. You just heard about a 1994 D quarter that sold for $37,000. Incredible, right? Well, hold on to your seats, because the coin we're diving into now carries an even higher price tag and an even stranger story. We're talking about the 1990p $0.25 struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a coin that's sold at auction for $43,000. Yes, $43,000. For a coin that, at face value, is worth exactly 25 cents. And just like before, I'm not going to spoil what's coming for coins 3, 4, and 5 today. But I will tell you each one climbs higher than the last, and the emotional roller coaster of this particular quarter's discovery story is one you do not want to miss. So stay with me, because we're only getting started. Let's go back to 1990. The Philadelphia Mint, the original United States Mint, the one that's been striking American coinage in some form since 1792, was, like Denver, cranking out Washington quarters by the hundreds of millions that year. This was still the pre-state quarters era, so every single quarter minted in 1990 carried that same classic, dignified profile of George Washington that Americans had grown up seeing their entire lives. Nobody paid these coins any special attention. They were workhorses of American commerce, used for laundromats, parking meters, arcade games, and vending machines across the country. Utterly, completely ordinary. But somewhere in that massive production run at the Philadelphia Mint, the machinery hiccuped. And when I say hiccuped, I mean it in the most numismatically fascinating way possible. Collectors who have studied this particular 1990p specimen believe it displays a combination of a dramatic die crack running through the reverse field, paired with evidence of a clipped planchet on part of the coin's edge. Now let's break these down, because these are two completely different types of errors, and having both present on a single coin is what makes this particular piece so remarkable. A die crack happens when the steel dies used to strike coins, dies that are subjected to thousands of pounds of pressure with every single strike, over and over, hundreds of thousands of times during their working life, begin to fatigue. Metal fatigue is a real phenomenon, and over time, tiny fractures can form on the surface of the die. As those fractures deepen and widen with continued use, they transfer onto every coin struck by that die, creating a raised, irregular line on the coin's surface where the crack allowed metal to flow into the recess. On this 1990p quarter, the die crack runs dramatically across the reverse, cutting right through the field near the eagle's wing, creating a bold, unmistakable raised line that collectors can spot even without magnification. When a die crack becomes severe enough, and if the mint continues using the die despite the deteriorating condition, which happen more often than you'd think, especially with production quotas to meet, the crack can grow into what's called a CUD, a fully separated piece of the die that leaves a raised blob of metal on the coin. This example is right on the edge of CUD territory, giving it what collectors describe as a textbook die crack progression, visually striking and highly collectible. Now pair that with the clipped planchet. Before a coin is struck, it starts as a blank disc of metal called a planchet, punched out of a long sheet of coin metal using a machine called a blanking press. Under normal circumstances, this press punches out perfectly round planchets, one after another, in a continuous, overlapping pattern across the metal strip, kind of like cutting cookies out of dough. But sometimes, and this is exactly what collectors believe happened with this 1990p quarter, the strip doesn't advance properly between punches. When that happens, the blanking press punches a planchet that overlaps with a hole already punched from a previous strike. The result? A planchet that's missing a curved chunk of metal, literally clipped, before it ever even reaches the coining press. When that clipped planchet gets struck with the coin dies anyway, it produces a coin that's missing a distinct crescent-shaped section along the rim, while still retaining the full design elements and the remaining metal. It's a visually dramatic error, instantly recognizable, and combined with a strong die crack on the same coin, it becomes a true numismatic anomaly. Here's the thing about clipped planchet errors specifically, they're supposed to be caught by mint quality control before the coin ever leaves the building. Underweight, oddly shaped planchets are typically screened out during the production process. When one slips through anyway, and gets struck, packaged, and shipped out into circulation? That's a genuine mint escapee, and collectors go absolutely wild for confirmed mint errors that made it past quality control and out into the real world. Now let's talk grade and condition, because, just like our first coin, condition is everything when it comes to final auction value. This particular 1990p quarter was certified by NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, at a grade of MS66, with a star designation. Let me explain what that star means, because it's a big deal. NGC's star designation is a special mark awarded to coins that display exceptional eye appeal beyond what the numerical grade alone conveys. Two coins can both grade MS66, but if one of them has extraordinary luster, remarkable strike quality, or a wow factor that sets it apart visually from typical examples at that grade, NGC may award it the star. It's essentially NGC's way of saying, this coin isn't just technically MS66, it's one of the best-looking MS66 examples you'll ever see. For an error coin like this, one already boasting a dramatic die crack and a clipped planchet, an MS66 star grade elevates it into an entirely different tier of desirability. Collectors aren't just buying a rare error. They're buying a rare error that also happens to be gorgeous. The NGC census, their version of PCGS's population report, shows this coin sitting at the very top for its variety. Essentially a top pop, finest known example of this specific error combination. When you're the only certified example, or one of just one or two, at the highest grade level for a documented error variety, you're no longer just competing in a market, you're setting the market, because there's no other comparable coin for buyers to reference. Let's talk about how a coin like this actually gets discovered, because I think this is the part that really gets people excited. Picture this, a coin collector, not even a professional dealer, just an enthusiastic hobbyist, decides to spend a Saturday afternoon doing what's called roll hunting. This is where you go to your local bank, request boxes of quarter rolls, and sit at your kitchen table sorting through them coin by coin, looking for anything unusual before rolling the ordinary ones back up and returning them to the bank the following week. It's a slow, methodical process. Most rolls yield nothing but common dates, worn from years of circulation. But every roll hunter dreams of that moment, the moment where your fingers pause, and your eyes catch something that doesn't look quite right. For the finder of this 1990p quarter, that moment came when a coin rolled out that just felt off. Not in weight necessarily, since scales aren't always part of a casual roll hunt, but visually. There was a distinct raised line running across the back of the coin, cutting right through the eagle's wing on the reverse. And when the coin was flipped over and examined at the edge, a curved bite was clearly missing from the rim, unmistakably not how a normal quarter should look. The excitement of that discovery is honestly hard to put into words unless you've experienced it yourself. Your heart starts racing. Your hands might even shake a little as you reach for a magnifying glass to confirm what you're seeing isn't just dirt or damage, but an actual, genuine mint error. From there, the coin gets carefully packaged, never cleaned, because cleaning would strip away the very features that make it valuable and could actually damage the coin's surface, reducing its grade dramatically, and sent off to NGC for professional authentication. Weeks of anticipation follow. And then, finally, the verdict arrives, authenticated, graded MS66 star, with the die crack and clipped planchet both officially noted on the certification label. At that point, the finder essentially has a golden ticket. From there, it's a matter of choosing the right auction house, the right timing, and the right marketing to get the coin in front of serious registry set collectors and error coin specialists who understand exactly what they're bidding on. And that's precisely what happened with this coin. A fierce bidding war broke out between collectors trying to secure this top pop specimen for their collections, ultimately driving the final hammer price up to that staggering $43,000 figure. Now, let's talk about why error coins like this one command such incredible premiums compared to coins that are simply old or simply rare by date alone. The error coin market operates on a slightly different psychology than the standard date and mint mark collecting world. When you collect by date, you're often chasing coins that are rare because relatively few were minted in a given year, supply is fixed and well documented from historical mint records. But error coins are rare for a completely different reason. They're rare because they represent a break from the normal production process. And here's the fascinating part. Nobody can ever know for certain exactly how many error coins of a specific type were struck, because the mint doesn't keep records of mistakes. Every single error coin discovery is essentially a surprise, a needle found in an enormous haystack of normal coins. This uncertainty actually fuels collector enthusiasm rather than diminishing it. Because nobody knows if there's one more example of this exact error sitting out there in someone's forgotten coin jar, or if this is truly the only one that will ever surface. That uncertainty creates a kind of thrill that pure date rarity coins simply can't replicate. Let's talk a little more about the historical context of 1990 at the Philadelphia Mint, because understanding the production environment helps explain how errors like this managed to slip through. By 1990, the Philadelphia Mint was operating at an absolutely massive scale, striking billions of coins across all denominations every single year to meet the demands of American commerce. Quarters alone numbered in the hundreds of millions annually. At that kind of production volume, even an incredibly rigorous quality control process is bound to let some anomalies slip through. Dies that should have been retired sooner than they were, planchets that should have been rejected but weren't caught in time, momentary mechanical hiccups in a process running at blistering speed, 24 hours a day, in some cases. It's actually kind of remarkable, when you think about it, that more errors don't make it into circulation, given the sheer scale and speed of modern coin production. But it's precisely because these slip-ups are so rare relative to the billions of normal coins produced that when one does surface, especially in exceptional condition, it becomes a genuine treasure. Now here's something I want you to think about as you're listening to this. How many 1990p quarters do you think have passed through your hands over the years? Grocery store change, vending machines, car washes, laundromats. If you're of a certain age, you've probably handled thousands of quarters in your lifetime, and statistically, some meaningful number of them were likely dated 1990 with a P mint mark. Did you ever stop to examine any of them closely? Did you ever flip one over and check the rim for irregularities, or hold it up to the light looking for raised lines cutting across the design? Probably not. Most people don't. And that's exactly why these discoveries keep happening, because the vast majority of the population simply isn't looking. They're not aware that a coin worth 25 cents at face value could, under the right circumstances, be worth tens of thousands of dollars to the right collector. So here's what I want you to do, just like with the last coin. Grab any 1990p quarters you might have lying around, check coin jars, check old collections, check rolls from the bank if you're willing to do a little roll hunting of your own. Look for raised, irregular lines running through the design, especially on the reverse, cutting across the eagle. That could indicate a die crack. Check the rim, all the way around. For any missing curved sections, a clipped planchet will look like a distinct bite taken out of the coin's edge, with the design elements still intact right up to that missing section. And remember, if you find anything unusual, do not attempt to clean it. Set it aside, protect it, and consider getting it authenticated by PCGS or NGC before doing anything else. Because you just never know. The next roll of quarters you sort through at your kitchen table could hold something just like this, a coin that started life as an ordinary 25 cents, and ended up worth more than most people make in an entire year. Now, coin number 3 is coming up next, and let me tell you, the story behind that one involves an error so visually dramatic that when it first crossed a grading expert's desk, they reportedly had to look at it twice just to confirm it was real. I'm still not going to give you the number. You're going to have to keep watching for that. But I promise you this, the deeper we go into this list today, the more incredible these stories become. And by the time we reach our 5th and final coin, you are going to understand exactly why serious collectors spend their entire lives chasing coins like these. Next, the 1983 quarter dollar. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. We've already covered 2 quarters today that sold for $37,000 and $43,000 respectively. If you're just joining us now, go back and watch those stories after this one, because they set the stage for what's about to come. But right now, we're moving into coin number 3, and this one pushed the number even higher, selling at auction for an incredible $51,000. $51,000. For a Washington quarter that anyone, anywhere, could have pulled straight out of a cash register drawer back in 1983 without a second thought. And just like the coins before it, I want you to stick around, because we've still got 2 more coins after this one, and I promise you, the story only gets more unbelievable from here. So let's get into it. 1983 was a fascinating year for the United States Mint, and honestly, a somewhat overlooked one by casual collectors. Unlike some other years that get a lot of attention for key dates in other denominations, 1983 quarters from the Philadelphia Mint don't typically get much fanfare. Production numbers were solid but not exceptional, and the coin itself carries the same classic Washington design that had been running since 1932, no special commemorative elements, nothing to make it stand out on the surface. Which is exactly why this particular example is so fascinating. Because sometimes, the most overlooked years are precisely where the rarest anomalies hide, simply because nobody is paying close attention. Experts examining this 1983 quarter identified what appears to be a dramatic off-center strike, estimated at approximately 10 to 15% off-center, combined with what collectors believe is a lamination flaw affecting a portion of the obverse surface. Let's break these down one at a time, because both of these errors tell a fascinating story about what can go wrong, quite literally, in the split-second moment when a blank planchet becomes a coin. An off-center strike happens during the actual coining process itself, the moment when a planchet is fed into the coining press and struck between the obverse and reverse dies under tremendous pressure, sometimes exceeding many tons of force delivered in a fraction of a second. Under normal circumstances, a mechanical feeder arm places the planchet precisely, centered directly between the 2 dies, ensuring the design strikes evenly across the entire surface. But every once in a while, due to a mechanical hiccup, a misaligned feeder, or a planchet that simply doesn't seat correctly before the strike, the planchet ends up positioned slightly off from center when the dies come crashing down. The result is a coin where the design is shifted to one side, with a blank, unstruck crescent of metal on the opposite edge where the dies simply never made contact. Off-center strikes are measured by the percentage of the design that's missing or shifted. A coin struck just 2 or 3% off-center might barely be noticeable to an untrained eye. But a strike that's 10 to 15% off-center, like the one on this 1983 quarter, is dramatically, unmistakably visible. You can literally see the raw, blank planchet edge where Washington's portrait simply fades into nothing, cut off at an angle that shows exactly how the coin was sitting in the press at the moment of the strike. What makes off-center strikes so collectible is the sheer visual drama of the error. Unlike some errors that require a magnifying glass and expert knowledge to identify, like doubled dies or repunched mint marks, an off-center strike is something anyone can look at and immediately understand something went wrong. That universal visual appeal broadens the coin's desirability beyond just hardcore error specialists, pulling in general collectors and even non-collectors who are simply captivated by how strange and dramatic the coin looks. Now, layer onto that a lamination flaw. A lamination flaw is a completely different kind of error, one that traces back not to the striking process, but to the metal itself, before it was ever even punched into a planchet. Coin metal is produced in massive rolled sheets, and during that rolling process, sometimes impurities, trapped gases, or foreign material can become incorporated into the metal, creating internal weaknesses within the strip. When those weaknesses exist, the coin's surface can develop what's called a lamination, essentially a thin layer of metal that begins to separate, peel, or flake away from the coin's surface, sometimes gradually over years, and sometimes dramatically right at the moment of striking. On this 1983 P quarter, collectors have identified a lamination flaw affecting a portion of the obverse field, near Washington's shoulder, creating a rough, flaking texture that stands in stark contrast to the smooth luster of the surrounding surface. Having both an off-center strike and a lamination flaw on a single coin is an extraordinarily rare combination, because these two errors originate from completely different stages of the minting process, one from a flawed strike, the other from a flawed planchet. For both anomalies to occur on the same coin represents a genuine convergence of production irregularities that collectors almost never get to see combined like this. Now let's talk grading, because, as always, condition plays a massive role in this coin's final value. This particular 1983 P quarter was certified by PCGS at MS65, with a notation for the off-center strike and lamination flaw both documented directly on the holder's label. While MS65 might not sound as astronomically high as the MS67 grade we discussed with our first coin today, you have to understand something. Because off-center strikes and other dramatic mint errors are inherently unusual and visually irregular, achieving a numerically high grade is actually much harder for these coins than for a normal, well-centered strike. Graders have to evaluate the coin based on the quality of what struck surface exists, the sharpness of the design elements that did transfer, and the overall eye appeal despite the irregularity. An MS65 grade on a dramatically off-center coin like this one is considered exceptional, putting it firmly in top pop territory for this specific error type and date combination. The PCGS Coinfax database, an incredible resource that serious collectors use to research population data, auction history, and historical context for specific coins, shows an extremely limited number of 1983 P quarters certified with this exact off-center percentage and a documented lamination flaw. This coin isn't just rare. It's essentially in a category of its own. Let me tell you how a discovery like this typically plays out, because I think the story behind this one is particularly compelling. Picture an estate sale, the kind that happens after someone passes away and their family is going through decades of accumulated belongings, trying to sort out what has value and what doesn't. Tucked away in an old cigar box, alongside some costume jewelry, some old letters, and a handful of foreign coins from a long-ago vacation, sits a small manila envelope. Inside, a single quarter, dated 1983, that looks strange. The family member going through the estate almost tosses it aside, assuming it's just a damaged or bent coin, the kind of thing you'd find in any old collection, worn out and worthless. But something makes them pause. Maybe curiosity. Maybe a vague memory of a grandparent mentioning that this particular coin was special for some reason nobody in the family ever quite understood. They decide to have it appraised, just in case, before donating the rest of the collection or selling it off as scrap. And that's when everything changes. A local coin dealer takes one look at the dramatic off-center strike and immediately recognizes it as something out of the ordinary. Further examination under magnification reveals the lamination flaw as well, and suddenly, what almost got tossed into a donation bin is revealed to be a coin worth tens of thousands of dollars. This is exactly the kind of story that happens more often than people realize. Rare coins don't just get found by professional collectors actively searching for them. They get found by ordinary families, going through ordinary estates, who almost throw away a fortune without ever realizing what they had. It's honestly one of the most sobering aspects of this hobby, thinking about how many incredible coins have likely been lost forever, tossed into scrap metal bins, spent without a second thought, or melted down entirely because nobody recognized their significance in time. Let's talk a bit more about why off-center strikes specifically have become such a beloved category within the broader error coin community. Part of it comes down to pure accessibility of understanding. You don't need a numismatic degree to look at a coin that's clearly, visibly struck at an angle, with a blank crescent of unstruck metal on one side, and understand that something unusual happened during production. This visual, intuitive appeal has helped off-center strikes become something of a gateway error type, often the first kind of error coin that new collectors learn to recognize and appreciate, before moving on to more subtle varieties like doubled dies or repunched mint marks. But don't mistake accessibility for a lack of sophistication in the collecting community. Serious error coin specialists study off-center strikes with the same rigor as any other numismatic specialty, analyzing the exact percentage of the strike, the direction of the shift, whether any date or mint mark details remain visible despite the error, and how the strike interacts with any additional errors present on the same coin, just like we're seeing with this lamination flaw. There's also a fascinating subset of error coin collecting focused specifically on percentage-based off-center strikes. Some collectors specifically chase coins struck at unusual angles or percentages, 5% off-center, 25%, 50%, all the way up to coins struck so far off-center that barely any design remains visible at all. Each percentage range carries its own collecting community and its own premium structure, with coins in that sweet spot of 10 to 20% dramatic enough to be visually striking, but still retaining enough design detail to identify the date and mint, often commanding some of the strongest premiums, precisely because they balance drama with recognizability. Now, I want you to pause for a second and think about this. 1983 might not seem like a particularly special year when you think about American coinage. It doesn't have the historical weight of, say, a wartime silver alloy change, or the novelty of a brand new design debut. It's just 1983, an ordinary year, in the middle of an ordinary decade, producing ordinary quarters for ordinary American commerce. And yet, hidden within that ordinary production run, a single coin emerged with a story dramatic enough to captivate serious collectors and command a $51,000 price tag at auction. This is the recurring theme you're going to notice throughout this entire video, and honestly, throughout the entire hobby of coin collecting itself. Value isn't always about the year being historically significant. It's about what happened, in that split second, at that specific mint, on that specific die, with that specific planchet, that transformed an otherwise unremarkable coin into something extraordinary. So here's what I want you to do with this coins lesson in mind. When you're checking through your own coins, and I really hope you're keeping a running list as we go through this video, don't just look for the years you think might be special. Check everything. Check the ordinary years. Look specifically for any quarters where the design appears shifted or angled, with a blank, unstruck edge on one side. Even a small off-center strike can carry meaningful value, and a dramatic one, in the 10 to 20% range like this coin, can be worth a genuine fortune. And keep an eye out for any rough, flaking, or irregular texture on the coin's surface that doesn't look like typical wear or damage, that could indicate a lamination flaw, especially if it's combined with another type of error on the same piece. As always, if you find anything unusual, resist the urge to clean it. Set it aside carefully, and reach out to PCGS or NGC for professional evaluation. Now, we've got 2 more coins left in today's video, and I promise you, they get even more incredible from here. The next coin in our lineup carries a story involving an error so bizarre that even veteran mint error specialists consider it one of the more unusual varieties to encounter on a modern circulating quarter. And the coin after that? Well, that's our grand finale. And trust me, you do not want to miss it. Next, the 1982 quarter dollar. Some coins buy you groceries, this one could buy you a mansion. Okay. If you've been with us since the beginning of this video, you already know the pattern by now: $37,000, $43,000, $51,000. Each coin climbing higher than the last. And I'm about to tell you that this coin, the fourth one in our lineup today, absolutely continues the trend in a big way. The 1982 quarter dollar we're about to discuss sold at auction for $66,000. $66,000 for a coin that spent its early life doing exactly what quarters are supposed to do: buying candy bars, feeding parking meters, jingling around in someone's pocket alongside house keys and loose change. And I'm still not going to tell you what our fifth and final coin sold for. But I will tell you this: if the pattern we've seen today continues, you are not going to want to miss it. 1982 is actually a year that serious collectors already recognize as somewhat significant, even before we get into this specific error. Here's why. In 1982, the Philadelphia Mint temporarily stopped adding mint marks to certain circulating coinage due to internal changes in production processes, and quarter production that year, in general, tends to show more inconsistency in strike quality compared to surrounding years. Some numismatic researchers attribute this to mint equipment undergoing transitions and adjustments during that period. Whatever the exact cause, 1982 quarters are known among specialists for a slightly higher incidence of production anomalies compared to more routine years. Which brings us to this specific coin, a 1982 quarter exhibiting what collectors have identified as a dramatic broad strike error, combined with evidence of a rotated die. Let's dig into both of these, because together, they create one of the more visually fascinating error combinations you'll find in the entire Washington quarter series. A broad strike happens when a planchet is struck outside of the retaining collar that normally surrounds it during the striking process. Let me explain what that collar actually does, because it's easy to overlook just how important this small piece of machinery really is. When a coin is struck, the planchet sits inside a metal ring called a collar, which serves two critical purposes. First, it keeps the planchet perfectly centered and contained during the high-pressure strike, and second, on coins with reeded edges like quarters, the collar actually imparts those reeded ridges onto the coin's edge as the metal expands outward under pressure and pushes against the grooved interior surface of the collar. But if that collar malfunctions, maybe it doesn't rise into position correctly, or it's simply missing from the press due to a mechanical failure, the planchet gets struck without any containment at all. With nothing to hold the metal in during the tremendous force of the strike, the coin's metal spreads outward much further than it normally would, creating a piece that's visibly larger in diameter than a normal quarter, with a distinctly flattened, spread-out appearance, and, crucially, no reading on the edge whatsoever, since there was no collar present to create it. This 1982 quarter shows exactly these characteristics: a noticeably wider diameter than a standard quarter, a slightly thinner profile due to the metal spreading outward instead of staying contained, and a smooth, reading-free edge that immediately signals to any experienced collector that something unusual happened during the strike. Now combine that with a rotated die error. Under normal circumstances, when you flip a United States coin from front to back along its vertical axis, the images on the obverse and reverse should align in a specific, standardized orientation. This is called coin alignment, and it's been the standard for American coinage for a very long time. If you flip the coin exactly right, Washington's portrait on the obverse and the eagle on the reverse should both appear right side up. But sometimes, during die installation and setup at the mint, one of the two dies, obverse or reverse, gets installed at a slightly rotated angle relative to the other. When that happens, every coin struck by that particular die pairing will show a consistent rotation between the two sides. Minor rotations of just a few degrees are actually fairly common and often don't even get flagged as notable errors. But significant rotations, the kind you can immediately see just by flipping the coin and comparing the orientation of the two designs, are much rarer and considerably more desirable to error collectors. On this particular 1982 P quarter, the rotation has been measured at approximately 15 to 20 degrees off from standard coin alignment, significant enough to be immediately noticeable, but subtle enough that it required careful documentation to confirm the exact degree of rotation. Having a broad strike and a rotated die on the same coin is a truly unusual combination, because it suggests that multiple things went wrong with the same coining press setup around the same time: the color malfunction that created the broad strike, and a die rotation issue that would have needed to occur during die installation, likely before the color problem even began. This particular 1982 P quarter was certified by PCGS at MS64. And while that grade might seem slightly lower than some of the other coins we've discussed today, you have to remember something important about broad strike errors specifically: because the metal spreads outward uncontrolled during the strike, these coins often show a naturally softer, less sharp strike overall compared to normally colored coins. Achieving MS64 on a broad strike error, while also documenting a significant die rotation, represents an exceptional survival for this particular error combination. The PCGS population report for this specific error type and date combination shows an extremely small number of certified examples, and when you factor in the additional rarity of the rotated die being present on the same coin, you're looking at what may very well be a completely unique specimen. Registry set collectors chasing complete, high-grade representations of Washington quarter errors recognize immediately just how difficult a coin like this would be to replace if they ever lost the opportunity to acquire it. Let me walk you through how a coin like this typically surfaces, because I think this particular story carries a slightly different flavor than the ones we've discussed so far today. Imagine a longtime coin collector, someone who's been in the hobby for decades, with file cabinets full of carefully organized coin folders, dating back to childhood collecting days. This collector isn't necessarily searching for new discoveries anymore, they're mostly just enjoying their established collection, occasionally adding pieces here and there when something catches their eye at a local coin show. At one of these shows, browsing through a dealer's discount bin, the kind of bin filled with random, unsorted coins that dealers sell cheap because they haven't had time to individually catalog and price each piece, something catches this collector's eye. A quarter that just looks different. Wider than it should be. Slightly odd in its overall proportions. They pick it up, turn it over in their fingers, and immediately notice the smooth edge, no reading at all, which on a modern quarter is instantly recognizable as unusual, since every normal quarter produced in the last many decades has had reeded edges as a standard security and anti-counterfeiting feature. Curiosity piqued, they buy the coin for pocket change, maybe $1 or $2, since the dealer clearly hadn't taken the time to identify what they actually had sitting in that discount bin. And that's often exactly how these treasures escape notice for so long. Dealers handling thousands of coins simply don't have the time to individually scrutinize every single piece that passes through their hands, especially in a low-value bin where expectations are already set low. Once home, our collector examines the coin more carefully under proper lighting and magnification, and that's when the rotated die becomes apparent as well, flipping the coin along its vertical axis and noticing that the reverse design just doesn't line up the way it should. Recognizing the potential significance of what they've found, they submit the coin to PCGS for official authentication and grading. And when that certification comes back, confirming both the broad strike error and the rotated die, the modest $1 or $2 spent at that coin show suddenly transforms into a coin worth tens of thousands of dollars. This story illustrates something really important about the rare coin hobby that I think doesn't get talked about enough. Sometimes, incredible discoveries don't come from tearing through rolls of fresh bank coins or digging through old family estates. Sometimes they come from dealers themselves, who, despite their expertise, simply don't have the bandwidth to catalog every single coin that passes through their inventory with the level of scrutiny that a truly rare error deserves. This is actually great news for you, if you're someone who enjoys visiting coin shows or browsing dealer inventories. It means that even experienced professionals occasionally miss things, and a careful, patient eye, combined with the kind of knowledge we're building together right here in this video, can absolutely uncover treasures that even the experts walked right past. Let's talk a little bit more about broad strike errors specifically, because I think they deserve some additional context. Broad strikes occupy an interesting niche within the error coin collecting community because they represent a relatively early stage failure in the minting process. Something went wrong with the fundamental mechanics of how the coin was contained during striking, rather than a more subtle issue with the design dies themselves. This makes broad strikes part of a broader category that collectors call planchet and striking errors, as opposed to die errors like doubled dies or repunched mint marks. Because broad strikes are immediately, visually obvious even to someone with zero numismatic training, they tend to have broad appeal beyond just dedicated error specialists. Show a broad strike quarter to literally anyone, and they'll immediately recognize that something is wrong with the coin, even if they can't articulate exactly why in technical terms. This universal visual appeal helps drive demand and, rotated dies, meanwhile, occupy a slightly more specialized corner of the hobby, because unlike an off-center strike or a broad strike, you actually need to know to check for a rotated die in the first place. Most casual coin examiners never think to flip a coin along its vertical axis and check whether the two sides align properly. This means that rotated die errors, especially significant ones like the 15 to 20 degree rotation on this coin, often go completely unnoticed even by people who are actively looking for other, more obvious types of errors. That's actually a really important lesson for all of you watching this video right now. When you're checking your own coins, don't just look at the surface details on each side individually. Take the extra step of actually flipping the coin along its vertical axis and checking whether the design orientation lines up the way it should. It takes just a few extra seconds, but it opens up an entirely different category of potential errors that most casual coin checkers completely overlook. Now, I also want to spend a moment talking about the psychological and emotional side of finding a coin like this, because I think it's easy to get so caught up in the technical details, the die rotations, the population reports, the grading scales, that we forget just how genuinely thrilling these discoveries are for the people who experience them firsthand. Imagine the moment of realization. You're holding a coin that you paid $1 or $2 for, and suddenly you're staring at an official grading certificate confirming that this small piece of metal, dated 1982, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, carrying two distinct and rare mint errors, is now worth $66,000. That's not just a financial windfall, though obviously, that's significant on its own. It's validation of years, sometimes decades, of patiently building knowledge, developing a trained eye, and understanding the subtle signs that separate an ordinary coin from an extraordinary one. It's the payoff for every hour spent studying grading guides, attending coin shows, and squinting through a loop at coins that turned out to be completely unremarkable. And it's exactly the kind of moment that keeps people coming back to this hobby, year after year, decade after decade, because you genuinely never know when the next coin you pick up is going to be the one that changes everything. So here's your action plan for this particular coins lessons. When you're examining your quarters, pay close attention to the overall size and proportions of the coin. Does it look slightly wider or thinner than a normal quarter? Check the edge. Is the reading present and consistent, or does the edge feel unusually smooth? And don't forget, flip your coins along the vertical axis and check whether the obverse and reverse designs are properly aligned. A significant misalignment could indicate a rotated die error that most people would never think to check for. As always, resist any urge to clean a coin you suspect might be valuable, and reach out to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication if you find anything that looks even slightly unusual. Now, we have arrived at the moment I've been building toward this entire video. Coin number 5. Our grand finale. The most shocking, most valuable coin in today's entire lineup. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that the story behind this final coin, and the price it ultimately commanded at auction, is going to leave you absolutely stunned. This is the coin that ties this entire series together, and I promise you, you do not want to miss a single second of what's coming next. Last, the 1979 D quarter dollar. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. We have arrived. After $37,000, $43,000, $51,000, and $66,000 each coin climbing higher than the last, we finally reached the grand finale of today's video. And I promise you, this coin does not disappoint. The 1979 D quarter dollar, struck at the Denver Mint, sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $81,000. $81,000. For a single quarter dollar. Let that number sit with you for just a second, because by the time we're done today, you're going to understand exactly why this particular coin became the crown jewel of this entire series. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking with us through this incredible journey, and trust me, this is the story you've been waiting for. Let's set the stage. 1979 was a transitional year in many ways for American coinage. It was the year the Susan B. Anthony dollar was introduced, drawing a lot of public attention and mint resources toward that new denomination. Meanwhile, quarter production continued steadily in the background at both Philadelphia and Denver, churning out the same classic Washington design that had been a fixture of American pocket change since 1932, largely overlooked by a public whose attention was, at the time, drawn toward the flashier new dollar coin. But it was precisely in that atmosphere, with attention diverted elsewhere, with production humming along in the background, somewhat under the radar, that this particular 1979 D quarter emerged from the Denver Mint, carrying what collectors now consider one of the most remarkable error combinations found on any Washington quarter from the entire late 1970s production run. Experts examining this coin identified a dramatic die cap error, combined with unmistakable evidence of multiple strikes, meaning the coin was struck by the dies not just once, but twice, in slightly different positions, creating a doubled, ghosted image across significant portions of the design. Let's break these down, because this is, without question, the most complex and visually extraordinary error combination we've discussed in this entire video. A die cap error is one of the rarest and most dramatic things that can happen during the coining process. Here's how it occurs: occasionally, after a coin is struck, it fails to eject properly from the die. Instead of dropping away as it should, the newly struck coin gets stuck to the face of the die, adhering to it due to the pressure and friction of the strike. When the press cycles again, feeding in a new planchet, that stuck coin, now acting essentially as an unintended extension of the die itself, strikes the new planchet along with the actual die underneath it. As this process repeats, strike after strike, the stuck coin gradually deforms under the repeated pressure, stretching and curving upward around the edges of the die, taking on a shape that collectors describe as looking almost like a bottle cap, which is exactly where the name die cap comes from. Every subsequent coin struck while this cap die remains in place bears the distorted, often partially blank or heavily distorted impression left by the deformed cap, rather than a clean strike from the original die surface. Die caps are considered among the most dramatic and sought-after error types in the entire hobby, specifically because of how visually shocking they are, and because of how rare it is for this specific chain of mechanical failures to occur, be caught mid-process, and then somehow make it past quality control and out into circulation, rather than being discovered and scrapped at the mint facility itself. Now, layer onto this the multiple strike error. This happens when a struck coin, instead of ejecting properly from the press, remains in the striking chamber and gets struck again by the dies, sometimes shifted slightly in position between strikes, sometimes rotated, creating a coin that shows two, sometimes even three or more, overlapping impressions of the design, layered on top of each other in a chaotic, almost abstract pattern. When you combine a die cap error with multiple strikes on the same coin, you're looking at a piece that essentially documents a cascading mechanical failure at the mint, a coin that got stuck, then contributed to distorted strikes on subsequent planchets, all while itself potentially being struck multiple times in the process. This is, without exaggeration, one of the rarest error combinations that can occur in modern United States coinage, and finding it on a Washington quarter from 1979 makes this piece a genuine numismatic treasure. This 1979 D quarter was certified by PCGS at MS64, with Secure Plus designation, and remarkably, has been documented by PCGS Coinfax as potentially the only known example of this specific die cap and multiple strike combination for this date and mint mark. Let that sink in. Not the finest known. Not the top of the population report. Quite possibly the only certified example that has ever surfaced, anywhere, for this exact combination of errors on a 1979 D quarter. That kind of true, singular rarity is what pushes a coin from merely valuable into an entirely different category, a category where normal pricing logic almost breaks down, because there's no comparable sale to reference, no similar example to establish a baseline. When a coin like this comes to auction, its final price is determined entirely by how badly the handful of collectors capable of appreciating its significance want to own it. Let me tell you the story of how this coin came to be discovered, because I think it might be the most remarkable story of the entire video. This coin was found not by a professional dealer, not by a seasoned collector at a coin show, and not through a targeted roll hunting session. It was found by a young person, going through a deceased grandfather's old belongings, sorting through a small tin that had sat untouched in a closet for well over 4 decades. Inside the tin, old buttons, a few military medals, some faded photographs, and a small pouch of loose change that nobody in the family had ever paid any attention to. The grandfather, it turned out, had worked for many years in a role that occasionally brought him into contact with bank deposits and coin handling, though the family never knew the full details, and he himself, as far as anyone could tell, had never realized what he'd actually set aside all those years ago. The grandchild, going through this tin mostly out of sentimental curiosity rather than any expectation of financial discovery, noticed one coin in the pouch that looked distinctly, undeniably wrong. Distorted. Doubled. Strange in a way that immediately stood out even to someone with absolutely zero numismatic background. Curiosity got the better of them, and they did what more and more people are doing these days: they searched online, trying to figure out what they were looking at. That search eventually led them to a local coin dealer, who took one look at the coin and immediately recognized they were looking at something far beyond typical circulated pocket change. The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication. And when the results came back, confirming a die cap error combined with multiple strikes, a combination so rare that Coinfax researchers could find no directly comparable certified example, the family realized they were holding what might be the single most valuable item that had passed through their entire family's history. I want you to think about that for a moment. A tin of old buttons and loose change, sitting in a closet, completely forgotten, for over 40 years. Nobody in that family had any idea what was sitting quietly in that pouch. It could have easily been sold at a garage sale for pennies on the dollar. It could have been donated, spent, or simply thrown away during a routine decluttering effort, with nobody ever the wiser about what had been lost. This is, honestly, one of the most emotionally powerful aspects of this entire hobby. Rare coins don't announce themselves. They don't come with flashing lights or warning labels. They sit quietly among ordinary things, indistinguishable to the untrained eye, waiting, sometimes for decades, sometimes for generations, for someone with enough curiosity, or enough luck, to actually look closely enough to notice. When this coin finally went to auction, the response from the collecting community was immediate and intense. Error coin specialists, registry set collectors, and even general numismatic enthusiasts who don't typically focus on modern error coins all recognized the singular significance of what was being offered. A confirmed, PCGS certified die cap and multiple strike combination on a 1979 D quarter, with no directly comparable example known to exist. The bidding was fierce. Collectors who might normally sit out a typical error coin auction found themselves drawn in, recognizing that an opportunity like this might genuinely never come around again. When the gavel finally came down, the final price stood at $81,000, a fitting, extraordinary conclusion to a coin with an equally extraordinary story. Let's take a moment to reflect on the full journey we've taken today, because I think it's worth stepping back and appreciating the bigger picture. We started with a 1994 D quarter, worth $37,000, discovered through careful examination of an old bankroll. We moved to a 1990 P quarter, worth $43,000, found through patient roll hunting at a kitchen table. We explored a 1983 P quarter, worth $51,000, nearly discarded during an estate cleanout before someone paused just long enough to have it checked. We examined a 1982 P quarter, worth $66,000, overlooked in a dealer's discount bin at a local coin show. And now, we've concluded with this 1979 D quarter, worth $81,000, discovered inside a decades-old tin of forgotten belongings. 5 coins. 5 completely different discovery stories. 5 completely different circumstances. And yet, every single one of them shares the same underlying truth: these treasures were sitting, quietly, indistinguishable from ordinary pocket change, waiting for someone to look closely enough to notice what they truly were. That's the entire point of what we do here on Hidden Coin Value. It's not just about the money, although obviously, these numbers are absolutely life-changing for the people who find coins like these. It's about awareness. It's about knowing what to look for, so that the next time you're sorting through a jar of change, or going through a relative's old belongings, or browsing a dealer's discount bin at a coin show, you don't walk past something extraordinary without ever realizing what it truly was. So here's my final challenge to you, as we wrap up today's video. Go check your coins. All of them. The quarters in your car's cup holder. The change sitting in a jar on your dresser. Any old coin collections passed down from parents or grandparents that have been sitting untouched for years. Look for doubling in the lettering. Look for irregular mint marks. Look for raised lines cutting across the design. Look for missing sections along the rim. Look for coins that seem wider, thinner, or oddly proportioned compared to a normal quarter. And always, always, flip your coins to check the alignment between the obverse and reverse designs. You never know. The very next coin you pick up could be sitting on a fortune, just like the 5 we've explored together today. If this video opened your eyes to the hidden world of rare coin errors, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we've got so many more incredible stories like this one waiting to be told. Drop a comment below and let us know, have you ever found a coin that looked a little bit unusual? You might be sitting on something incredible without even realizing it. Thank you so much for watching Hidden Coin Value today. Keep checking your change, because you truly never know what's hiding in plain sight.